My pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Houman Haddad. Considered one of the 2019 World's Top 50 Thinkers by Prospect Magazine, Houman Haddad is the head of emerging technologies at the United Nations World Food Program. The World Food Program was awarded the 2020 Nobel Peace Prize for its effort to combat hunger, for its contribution to bettering conditions for peace in conflict-affected areas, and for acting as a driving force in efforts to prevent the use of hunger as a weapon of war and conflict. Congratulations, Houman, to you and your colleagues. Houman has contributed to these peace-building efforts as the founder of WFP's Building Blocks Project, which seeks to harness the power of blockchain to foster interagency collaboration and create efficiencies. Building Blocks is the world's largest implementation of blockchain technology for humanitarian assistance, currently serving 700,000 Syrian and Rohingya refugees in Jordan and Bangladesh. Blockchain technology also has the potential to empower the vulnerable through financial inclusion and digital identities. Houman joined the WFP in 2010, and prior to joining the WFP, he worked in Canada's banking sector. You may recall that a year ago in my president's speech, when I spoke about our conference theme, I shared examples of information and technologies to explore, such as the case of the use of blockchain for food distribution in the Satari refugee camp in Jordan, referring specifically to Houman's work with Building Blocks. Several months ago, in discussing with Houman the focus of his keynote, we also discussed how his work has implications for community currency, distributed trust, and artificial general intelligence. Please join me in welcoming Houman Haddad, who will speak to us about depoliticizing information through blockchain. Welcome, Houman.
Thank you so much, Clara, for that fantastic introduction. Hello, everybody. I also have a video to show. We weren't sure whether to show the video at the beginning or at the end, but because much of what I will present is theoretical, we thought perhaps showing the video at the beginning will help contextualize the information that we will present later. This video was created for our executive board a few months ago. So unfortunately, we didn't have a chance to create a dedicated video for this conference. However, it should capture the majority of what we're going to present in about 4 minutes. So with that, if I might ask for the video to be started, please.
Whenever a need arises, humanitarian organizations respond by providing assistance such as food, health, education, and protection. Typically, organizations have clear mandates and they coordinate their activities through the various sectors at a high level. But often, especially with cash-based transfers, several organizations provide similar assistance to the same population. There is no detailed visibility on precisely who is assisting whom with what and how the assistance is being utilized. As such, there is a potential for unintentional and systematic over or under targeting. If all organizations use the single system for assistance coordination and delivery, we could have a common visibility of the people we serve. However, our operational reality is too complex for any one system to meet all needs. As COVID-19 continues to accelerate the demand for humanitarian assistance, while continuing to disrupt vital supply chains, we need to align our collective efforts and combine our resources towards holistic outcomes. Since 2016, WFP has been developing towards exactly that solution through its Building Blocks project. Building Blocks is an assistance coordination and delivery engine built on top of a neutral blockchain network. On Building Blocks, various humanitarian organizations collaborate to obtain a common view of the people that we serve.
There is no hierarchy on BB. Every member is 100% equal, and the network is co-owned, jointly operated, and mutually governed.
This allows us to break out of the traditional approach of assisting people through the fragmented lenses of nutrition, health, and education. Through this unified view, We can bring all the pieces of the puzzle together and obtain a holistic view of the people we serve. This enables us to harmonize and optimize our collective aid at a global level and strive for more equitable outcomes. BB is the world's largest and most sophisticated implementation of blockchain technology for humanitarian aid, currently serving 300,000 Syrian and Rohingya refugees in Jordan and Bangladesh. To date, BB has processed $100 million of cash-based transfers through 6 million transactions and saved $1.2 million in bank fees. BB can accommodate the coordination and transfer of anything of value, from cash to food to wash items. The people served also enjoy increased convenience and choice by having all their entitlements available in one place. The very same BB model used by the humanitarians can also benefit governments with their social safety nets. BB is agile, built for flexibility and scalability. For example, overnight, we were able to switch from finger biometrics to QR codes, which can be scanned at a distance, reducing the potential for the transmission of COVID-19. So far, we've received generous funding from Australia, Belgium, Denmark, Germany, and Luxembourg. To use our collective resources as efficiently as possible, we make building blocks available for free to other humanitarian organizations. This way, all investments into building blocks automatically benefit all members, and we avoid the duplication of same features across multiple systems. We welcome further investment from the EB into building blocks so we can grow it into a powerful, free, and universal humanitarian tool that grows stronger the more it is used. We also ask the EB to advocate for building blocks to other humanitarian organizations so they join our efforts, and we can collectively maximize the impact of our limited resources and further empower the people we serve.
Alexander, for that. So we'll now go into the presentation, which I will speak about in more detail some of the concepts behind the video that you just saw. Next slide. A little bit about the World Food Programme. We already got an introduction from Clara. The WFP is the world's largest humanitarian agency, and we assist about 100 million people in 100 countries annually, and our mission is to end hunger. Traditionally, this approach, at least in concept, has been simple in the sense that we procure various types of food like corn or rice or wheat, and then we ship it or bring it to the place that's where it's needed. Next slide. For a few years now, since 2019, we've also started using something we call cash-based interventions or cash-based transfers. And the idea behind this is that instead of saying, bring a bag of rice and giving it to someone and say, eat this, we enable them to make their own purchasing decisions. These can take the forms of e-voucher, prepaid bank cards, mobile money, outright cash sometimes. And several benefits could be that, for example, it improves dignity. So instead of being told what to eat, you can make your own choice. At times, it can be more cost-effective if we can procure the food locally. And in fact, if we do procure locally, we simulate the local economy as opposed to killing the smallholder farmers by bringing corn from the other side of the world. If it's available, then we try to procure it that way. Next slide. This is growing really rapidly. So in 2009, we did about $10 million of so-called cash-based transfers. In 2019, last year, we did about $2.2 billion, which is a massive growth rate over the time. And we are not the only organization doing this. Many other humanitarian organizations are also switching to these cash-based intervention concepts. And there is also a fundamental logic behind all of it that the cause of most of the difficulties that people have around the globe at the end is poverty. Because with money, if you had enough, you could eat food, you could get educated, you could, avail of health services, and generally you can't. Next slide, please. When the assistance was so-called in kind, so for us, corn and rice, and for someone else, vaccines, and so on and so forth, the mandates were relatively clear. We give food, you give health, you provide education, you do protection. And there was still, of course, a need for coordination, but not as much as it is today with cash-based interventions. Next slide. If we're giving a similar type of assistance to the same people, the mandates between the various humanitarian organizations become a little bit blurry. Their mission statements become blurry, and their value added also becomes blurry, or at least the need for multiple actors. And this creates some issues at a time when coordination needs to be maximized because we're giving similar assistance to similar people. The willingness to collaborate goes down because it becomes an existential question almost of if we're all doing the same thing, then are we all needed? Next slide. This is a typical setup for how assistance is provided. So you have organization one, this could be WFP. We're using our internal system called Scope. We're providing cash, and in the example of Jordan, we're using a bank called the Jordan Ali Bank, and we're giving assistance to a beneficiary. Another UN agency has another system. They're also giving cash, and they're using Cairo Amman Bank, and the list goes on. So everyone is assisting in a bit of a siloed manner, and really viewing people in the fragmented lenses of nutrition, protection, health, education, and so on and so forth. If you wanted to gain common visibility or harmonize your work, next slide, please. There could be a few approaches. One of them is that you connect all of these various systems together. So you create linkages via APIs or adapters that connect systems. There are two obstacles to this. One of them is purely technical. To connect 4 systems, you need 6 connections. To connect 10 systems, you need 45 connections, and it grows exponentially. And it's an absolute technical nightmare to maintain. There will be different standards, different communication protocols, so it's not really possible. But the other issue with it is also political, because using traditional technology, then somebody would technically have to be the system owner or the system administrator, and that person would be perceived as having more power. Therefore, the willingness of other organizations to participate in this collaboration would go down. Next slide, please. Our ideal is to create a harmonized view of the people that we serve. So if you remember the other slide where everything was in silos, we want to put the people we serve right at the center of everything we do, channel all the various assistance that they receive, be it for food or shelter or for protection or for health, in one place. And from that one place, create linkages to various outlets for the people, such as ATMs to withdraw cash, or health clinics to receive health services, food outlets, schools, whatever is needed. And doing this, we, for the first time, put all the pieces together and get a harmonized view of the people we serve. Of course, there is correlation between the various kind of assistance. So nutrition affects health, health and nutrition affect education. And currently, in the siloed manner, these correlations are not visible. We know at a high level in a country, WFP does A, UNHCR does B, UNICEF does C, and so on and so forth. But exactly who this goes to, how it's distributed, it's not known. This also creates potential for so-called systematic over or under targeting. Because we don't know who we're assisting, some groups, maybe some of the younger people, more tech-savvy people, could just simply enroll themselves in more assistance programs and receive a lot of assistance from the various providers. And some of the most vulnerable or the marginalized might not be able or even knowledgeable enough to enroll, and therefore they won't receive assistance. Having this common view, we can at least analyze the cause of this. Do these people receive more because they need more, or these people less because they need less, or is it due to something else? And that also allows us to ensure more equitable outcomes. And finally, because we have visibility on the input and as well as the output, putting together, we can run various optimization models to stretch our limited resources as far as they could possibly go. Next slide, please. So in such a system, for example, anyone availing of this, let's say, network could look at a recipient's account and see the various assistance that they've been receiving and what that assistance is for. Next slide, please. And from the same place, they can also see how this assistance is being redeemed. So what is the behavior of the recipients, which again are inputs for that optimization models that I was talking about and making things more equitable. Next slide, please. Our solution is called Building Blocks. So it's a blockchain-based network. As Clara mentioned, is the largest in the world right now for humanitarian assistance. And the idea behind it is really to create this common visibility. And it provides a technical solution for having visibility on inputs and outputs and creating a holistic view. But importantly, it also removes the political barrier. Without getting into too much technicalities of blockchain, one of its features is that it can be designed so that it's 100% neutral, in the sense that instead of WFP or agency X or government ministry Y operating the system on behalf of everyone, each member is completely 100% equal owner, operator, and governor of the neutral network. There is no hierarchy. This removes the system ownership issues. It's not anymore about my system versus yours. And by depoliticizing this concept, we can depoliticize the information that goes through this, the information that at the end belongs to the people we serve, which is currently siloed in the systems of WFP, Organization X, or Ministry Y. We bring it all in one place together. And next slide, please. By doing that, we can even entertain other sort of use cases. And one of them is identity. So for example, a statistic is that refugees on average remain refugees for 15 years. So even in the case of the Syrian refugees, even if they did have documents, they would destroy them because if during their journey they were caught by the wrong rebel group and they were from the wrong ethnic background, they could have been killed. You arrive as a refugee in a new country and you have to work hard to reprove your identity, to reestablish yourself. People are born there, people get married, people get educated, people accumulate work permits. And again, if they were to go back to their home country or a third country, typically all of this information stays in the siloed systems of the various organizations that assist them. On this system, everything is available to them in one place and it's portable from place to place. The source of the information is irrefutable, it cannot be forged. So for example, if WFP makes a statement there or UNHCR makes a statement, there is no disputing that. And although not yet implemented in our use case because of technical limitations in terms of smartphone ownership or availability of internet, conceptually, on this system, the end recipient could truly own and control their own information. The information is not sitting with Google or WFP, and at best, we get access to the user. The information is sitting with the user, and they authorize every single access to that information, which is a goal we're striving for, not yet there because of technical issues. Next slide, please. So just some quick statistics. We started this project with 100 people in Pakistan in January of 2017. And in the video we produced, I think it was from June to July, we've since scaled up. So as of today, we're serving 700,000 Syrian and Rohingya refugees in Jordan and Bangladesh. As of November 1st, that figure will be 800,000. And we've, a lot of this journey we've had is about proving points. When we first proposed this, especially to an organization like WFP, which so far had been really a logistics company, shipping corn from this side to another, we've now shifted. We're now still a logistics company, but more and more logistics of information instead of physical goods. So at the time, the idea was that, oh, like, why do you want to get refugees Bitcoins? And, will they go on the dark web and do whatever with it? And the point of our Pakistan proof of concept was to show that the technology is not limited just to cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, but the foundational technology has other use cases, and that's what we proved. With that, we got a bit of leeway. We started a pilot in Jordan, and we've kind of been scaling that up. And so far, again, we've transferred $120 million, 7 million transactions, been through several security audits. And I think we've proven that it's secure, it's robust, and it gets the job done. So I hope we're at that tipping point to now be able to get partnership from other organizations to participate in this, because at the end, it's a network, it's power, it's in the network effect. And we've done everything we possibly could to make it neutral and apolitical to make sure that this succeeds, or many other past collaboration efforts have not, because at the end, it has come down to the politics of it. Next slide, please. So this is an image from our January 2017 proof of concept and the people that we served. It's in a village in Pakistan called Umarkot, which is on the border with India. So it's a Hindu population that lives on the Pakistani side. And this was the point that we demonstrated that the technology can be used outside of cryptocurrencies. And with that, I stop, and perhaps we can open it up for questions or comments. Over.
Thanks, Houman. That was really an inspiring talk that you shared with us. For the next 20-25 minutes, we are going to open up the floor for questions and answers. And you can post your question and answers in the Q&A space that is online in text form. Thanks. I'll start off with a question, Houman. Within our context of a neoliberal society where everything is a commodity, what challenges have you faced regarding implementation and operationalizing of this system, and how do you foresee overcoming some of those?
Well, that's in fact important, because information itself has become a commodity. It's become a big commodity. And the way it was going, it seemed that people who collect information on the people that we assist are now the owners of that information, and therefore they're empowered. Because if you want to work with those populations, you have to go through them, and it will help them get funding because they're saying we're the only ones who can help. Our hope really is to take that away and put the information and ownership eventually back in the hands of the people to who it belongs. And instead of competing directly cutthroat, to do something like co-opetition. We collaborate on the infrastructure and compete on the services. So instead of all of us creating various parallel systems that do the same thing essentially and waste donor money creating the same thing over and over. As mentioned in the earlier video, we make all of this available for free to other humanitarians. So we're like, if you have money, improve it, create an ID module, create an education module, let the infrastructure be there. Imagine we're FedEx and UPS and DHL. We're like, let's build a highway together that we can all deliver our packages, and then let's compete on the services. We can, have ship faster or break fewer things or whatever it is. And so this way we're sure that at the end of it, who's benefiting with the most out of the whole thing is the end people that we serve. There is another topic I'd like to add, but towards the very end, if there's any time left from the Q&A period.
We have a question from the audience. It says, thank you, Houman. Wonderful presentation. You touched on concerns about security and security audit. Can you comment more on what the biggest security and privacy risks are with this and how we mitigate those?
Absolutely. Very good question. So blockchain itself is a little bit sometimes not fully explained, because typically the angle from which it's explained is through cryptocurrencies, and that typically means from Bitcoin's perspective. Bitcoin is a public blockchain, so everything you put on there is visible for everyone to see. And the security of it is really each account on, let's say, the Bitcoin network has an associated password. if you keep that password secure, the chances of anything going wrong is very, very almost non-existent. But that password is not easy to manage. It's long, and there's a few things associated with it. So non-technical people might have a challenge with it. But I'm going back importantly to the public part. You can also run a blockchain in a private implementation, meaning that the information is not visible to the public, but only a select group of people, which is the route we have gone with. So our network is only open to participating reputable humanitarian organizations. And our approach to data protection privacy is not to say that we're very smart, we're going to encrypt this and keep that safeguarded. We, by definition, accept zero information such as names, date of birth, or biometrics. We really don't need this to do our work. All we need is anonymous identifiers. In the case of Jordan and Bangladesh, UNHCR, which is the UN refugee agency, and their mandate is protection, in fact registers people, and they assign them completely random, in the sense that from that ID, there is no way to go back to the actual person, identifier that then is public facing. So people like us can assist them, but I don't need to know the name or the date of birth or the religion of the person. I just need to know this is a person or a family who's entitled to receive assistance. So long story short, we don't put any of that data on our system anywhere, and especially not on the blockchain. And even then, we work with these anonymous identifiers, and even then, it's on a private network. Our assumption is that somebody might get unauthorized access to the network, but even then, they would just be able to see this random string account sent some food entitlements to this other random string, but who those accounts belong to or what it was used for will not be possible to be derived from the information on the system. So I hope that has answered the question. Over.
Great. We have another question by Dr. Rong Tang. She says, thanks for a very informative presentation. What specific roles does the information profession play besides supporting the technology infrastructure?
Well, information professionals, in one sense, have been very important in the construction of the technology and the architecture of the network to begin with. But what we're really hoping is that we get this data, again, not just on a operation or project by project, but at a global level. And with many new tools available to us, big data, artificial intelligence, there is new insights we can derive that has never been possible before, simply because the data was not possible before. As I was mentioned, I'm personally really interested to measure these correlations, especially unexpected or surprising correlations of, for example, varying the timing of a distribution instead of from the beginning of the month to the end, or combining it with a program like nutrition education or whatever, the impact this could have not only for nutrition, but on education, on health, and especially not only in one, but at once, but across time. So our hope is to generate a lot of clean, anonymous data, which can then be analyzed to derive insights we've never had before, to be able to do our work more intelligently and more effectively. Over. I'm sorry, over, this is a WFP thing. When we talk on radios, you have to say over, meaning you're done. Next person can start. So, yeah.
We have another question. It says, this is a great example of using distributed ledger technology. Thank you. To what extent do the individuals have access to their personal information, and what processes are in place to address inconsistencies in that data?
Okay, so one of the challenges we face is that, as I was mentioning, this secret or this password is long, and it's sensitive in the sense if you lose it, it's typically not easy or sometimes impossible to recreate it. So the best way to do it is that if people have access to smartphones. Now, in Jordan and in Bangladesh, some people have smartphones, not everybody. And we certainly don't want to discriminate against the least vulnerable, the ones who don't have phones. But on top of that, in Jordan and also in Bangladesh, the government shuts off the internet, citing security reasons. So two of the things we would need for people to be able to access their information are not there. Our design is done that the moment that's available, we can do that. But again, it would require smartphones and connectivity. In the meantime, though, our plan is to kind of place tablets in the outlets where beneficiaries come and wait before they do their shop. So they can do some very basic interactions. So they can see their remaining balance, their past transactions, if they want to double check something that they were not double charged or something of the sorts. And so having them, and people might be illiterate, they might be innumerate, but they're not unintelligent, right? And there is a lot of research in how you can communicate using not text, but images or animation. So we want to employ a bit of that too. So to kind of get people to interact with the digital system, to understand the meaning of the different things that are there and their information, to help us then that once we transition to their own devices, the transition would be easy. You know, like back in the day, many people used Lotus Notes as email. And once you got to the used to the idea of an email address, a subject, and an attachment, for those who had to then switch to a Microsoft Outlook, it was a bit of a learning curve, but it wasn't difficult because the concepts were in place. So again, our hope is that in our outlets where we can provide a device and where we do have connectivity, to get people to interact first, to then prepare them for the day that they will be doing this on their own. I hope that answers the question. Over.
Yes, Dr. Linda Roberts asked this question. There is much promise in what you shared. Thank you. I'm wondering how common visibility can be prevented from becoming a surveillance of the recipient's choices and behaviors, such as value judgments on how it is being spent and used, how aid is getting spent and used. You mentioned developing privacy controls being developed. What other steps will be taken to ensure equitable, non-judgmental use of data by the member organizations?
Well, as I mentioned, first of all, the data, at least on our network, is completely anonymized. So there is no way from the network to derive the thing. But it's not such a clear-cut, sort of clear-cut, black and white issue. For example, us as the World Food Program, we have many donors. Some donors, the conditionality of their donation is that the money should only be spent on food and nothing else, right? So not shoes, not medicine, it has to be food. So the only way we can ensure that is that we set up our own shops or we contract supermarkets or whatever and control what they have in their stores. So, and others, on the other hand, are, they don't restrict their funding. So they don't, essentially they leave it free. And these are competing philosophies. There's pros and cons, but us in the middle have to be able to entertain both. Of course, if somebody wants to only limit their assistance to food, we can't say, no, we don't, because that's our job, is food and zero hunger, right? So we need to be able to entertain both. On our network, we don't track individually what was what with the funds, but we do track the category. So was it food? Was it shelter? Was it protection? Was it something? And we need to do that. That's part of our accountability to our donors, that if they give us funding for something specific, then that's, you know, we lived up to our promise to provide that assistance in that type. So I think it, you know, we do need to be careful. I think that's why it's a closed network, only made available to the reputable humanitarian organizations. And as part of the membership, there needs to be a commitment to uphold the do no harm principles, meaning that in general, whatever you do is meant to assist people and not vice versa. But there is also another thing that, for example, in Bangladesh, there's a social safety net that it doesn't restrict people in terms of what they can spend. They get a fixed allotment. However, if they do spend a percentage of those funds on so-called healthy items like vegetables or whatever else, and not, for example, cigarettes, next month they get a bonus on top. So it's not penalizing people that for you know, having bought cigarettes, but it's rewarding people who perhaps make more healthy choices. And that's, again, part of that funding is to promote better dietary consumption. So it's a very fine line. We're super aware of that. But again, the system being fully anonymized by generally tracking across broad categories like health, education, protection, food, and so on and so forth, we're going to try to make sure that the system does not result in the opposite hope that we have for it. Over.
Our next question comes from Yun Yong Kim. If I've said your name correctly, I apologize if not. Thank you for the talk. How would you create the incentive for international cooperation, which seems necessary?
Well, actually, incentive is an interesting concept because typically in blockchain consortiums, incentive is financial based, right? So either you lock up some money and if you misbehave, that money goes, or if you do the right thing, you get some kind of a financial reward, or you're profiting from the system. Our system is entirely, the incentive is not financial based, but it's by our desire to assist the people that we serve and do it better. So the well-being of the people that we serve is the incentive, and by collaborating on this assistance, because as mentioned, everything is correlated, nothing is fully disconnected, that is really the incentive that we are hoping at least people find sufficiently motivational to join our effort. Over.
Yeah, Dr. Clara Chu asked the question, please describe the experience from the user's perspective. What is the learning curve for them and how do you build trust with them?
Right. So in both locations where we've so far rolled out the system, the users existed already. And as a matter of principle, we made it entirely transparent to them so that from their perspective, nothing would change. The learning curve, for example, for vendors could be one of the things that use the system. And our principle there is that with 0 instructions, they should be able to use the system. So what we do every time we have something new, we put the application in front of them and we ask them to sell us something without saying a single other word, and it works. If it doesn't, we go back, we simplify it to the point that that works. So we want really the technology to be empowering and not create any hurdle in terms of assisting people. So generally speaking, it's been positive. The learning curve has been quite shallow, and we automate the technology to the point possible so that the user, it's functional. Even WFP users who use the system, there is a tab called beneficiaries. So there's a tab called payments. And you don't need to know much about the working of blockchain or how everything else works. It's drag and drop and clicks. And again, intuitivity is a big, big principle in design for us. Over. I see a couple of other questions. There is one from Nitin, there's one from Abebe. I'm not sure if it's in order though.
Let me help here, Houman.
Yeah.
The question comes from Judith Van Alstein, who asks, are refugee members able to access both see and manage their personal information on a smartphone app or other methods?
So I think we partially answered this question when saying that currently no, because they don't have smartphone or connectivity, but the plan is to make some form of that available to them in tablets we would place in our distribution outlets.
We have Dr. Sandra Ardeles asked a question. Great presentation. What information do you have on personal refugee experiences in sharing their data and benefiting from the system? Any interesting personal case studies?
We had a colleague, actually, well, a friend, she's doing her PhD on digital anthropology at the University of Oxford, who spent quite a bit of time interviewing refugees in Azraq and Zatari camps in Jordan. The one important thing I want to clarify again here is that in both scenarios, we don't collect any information from the refugees. This is done by the UN protection agency called UNHCR. And we use the information they give us, as I mentioned, using these anonymous identifiers. Now, these populations are scared. The Rohingya are very scared of being persecuted, being sent back to Myanmar. However, UNHCR through the years has built this trust that as a protection agency, it will do everything in its power to protect the populations, including not sharing information even with host governments where possible. One of the challenging things, which again is not related to us, is, for example, collection of biometrics, iris scan, fingerprint. It's it's really difficult not to do a program like this without that information. I mean, people don't have any documents. People don't even know their date of birth, sometimes maybe the year of birth. If you're assisting the largest refugee camp in Bangladesh, for example, in the world, 850,000 people, the only real practical way to do that is through biometrics. In Jordan, it's a government requirement that refugees are biometrically registered at the point of entry. So that can be a bit uncomfortable for anybody, I imagine. But it's a reality, and initially, and by now, I am like everyone is super comfortable with it, and so far, thankfully, everything has been well protected. But that is a big risk. It's a very big risk, because should biometrics, for example, be exposed, it's practical. I mean, the whole point of them is that they're constant. So these are constant worries, but everything in everyone's power is being done to try to keep them as secure as possible. But it's very scary because some of the most advanced technology companies have their systems breached. We read about them. Again, it's a very fine line, but practically without, for example, biometrics, it would not be possible to assist at this scale. Over.
Our next question comes from Michael Twydale. You contrasted your system with Bitcoin. Bitcoin involves making enormous numbers of copies of the blockchain worldwide, where people are incentivized to make copies by mining. How does it work in this system?
Very good question. So, Bitcoin is designed with two things in mind. The participants don't know each other. The participants don't trust each other. These are really two components. And to overcome the incentive to cheat the system, because everyone has a copy, they use something called proof of work, which is essentially a very complex mathematical, actually it's a very simple mathematical question, but it's very difficult to solve it in the sense that there is no closed form solution to it. You have to do by trial and error. So you essentially have to guess a number that is the right number, and it would require trillions and trillions of guesses to get to that number at every 10 minutes. And the whole point of this is that you waste electricity to find this number. And by having wasted electricity and the cost of that electricity and the enormous power it takes to find that number, it disincentivizes people from cheating the system or spamming the system, because it's not cheap to do it. I think this was some time back, the Bitcoin network could do 1 trillion guesses per second. That's a really high number per second. And they have to try 10 minutes on average before they find the solution, the entire network, not even a single computer. And the other idea behind this is that even the fastest supercomputer in the world is not going to be able to solve this thing in 10 minutes. You need all these thousands of computers. And that also essentially randomizes who's going to win, because you could be lucky enough that you could start it close enough to this number, which also makes it more difficult to mount an attack on the system, because you can't know in advance who's the one who's going to find the number. It's a bit technical here, but in our scenario where we do know who the participants are, but we may still not trust them, we can use much more efficient algorithms. In our case, we use something called proof of authority, which is just going back to the question to make sure I got it correctly. It was the one contrasting with Bitcoin. But anyhow, long story short, that's one of the key differences that we have. And for example, with Bitcoin, you have to wait every 10 minutes. You get confirmation. With us, you get every 3 seconds your confirmation. And the number of transactions we can process per second is significantly higher than the Bitcoin network. I hope that answers the question. Over.
We have Dr. Nitin Verma ask a question. What hurdles has the World Food Program encountered from local governments and bureaucracies as far as the use of this unconventional monetary system in their territories is concerned?
That's the key word there is monetary. So typically, we don't know of any governments who are against use of blockchain, but lots are unsure about the use of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, because it will be seen as essentially launching a competing currency in someone's country, which means you take monetary control out of the system. We don't use cryptocurrencies, and our payments still follow through the official government channels. So We're not acting as a financial service provider. And so far, this has been good enough. We're using it essentially as an accounting system. Now, there is a really exciting opportunity for so-called government-issued digital currencies, which is essentially putting the dollar, the DACA, or the Jordanian dinar on the blockchain by the central bank. And if that happens, then we could then use our system even for payments. And because we're using the official government channels, that would be good. This could have a major implication for financial inclusion. Mobile money already took countries like Kenya, where many people didn't have bank accounts, and through mobile money connected them to digital financial services. But it's still based on a mobile company provider. There's still fees associated with it, which are not as cheap anymore. With blockchain, then this account where you have all your information, like your education credentials, your health history, your work permits, and your money could be one. And it could follow you around with all the security features. Of course, this is aspirational. This is not today. We need to wait a few years for that. But we're like, if we're putting the building blocks in place, why not do so for something that has that additional potential as well? Over.
Our next question comes from Abeba Rorissa. You have shown that building blocks is scalable. Do you think that BB works according to World Food Programme's original specification? In other words, it does what you wanted it to do. If not, are there plans to improve the system, and in what ways?
Excellent question. So our original concept was this. There is something of value. This something of value needs to go to someone. This someone needs to be able to redeem that, and we need to account for the whole thing. And these are represented by tokens, blockchain tokens representing food or cash or medicine or whatever. So this general design has worked really well, not only for us, but also for other people, because at the end, in the humanitarian assistance, there's something of value that you're giving to someone that they need to redeem, and you need to account for it. And again, what that is very flexible. We're doing food, UN Women is doing cash, UNICEF is doing soap, IOM is doing gas, cylinder, whatever. So that is really, straightforward. The next step is information tokens. So I was mentioning, for example, if you got vaccinated, this is a big issue even in Cox's Bazar. There's 70 plus health providers who provide vaccination services. And they do have a common 70 different health providers. They do have a common vaccination booklet, but sometimes the refugees lose it or they don't bring it, so they get vaccinated for the same thing again and again and again. So one way would be that you issue a token that instead of representing value, it represents a piece of information saying person vaccinated by WHO. So then the next health provider before vaccinating says, oh, okay, you've been vaccinated for this, so we won't do it again. So that's something we're hoping to work on soon. But then one related question is that, or answer, is that, for example, right now we're using Ethereum, which is originally meant to be an open, unpermissioned blockchain, which is similar to concept and to Bitcoin. And because of this reason, that you don't know who you're working with and you don't trust them, there is some limitations built in, such as gas. The gas is the amount of work that is required to perform an operation, and you pay for this gas. Again, the idea is that it will make it expensive for you to spam the system, but also it avoids you getting stuck into computational loops. So if there's the problem you're submitting to the network doesn't have an eventual solution, it could go in a loop that crashes the whole network. It works really well for that public purpose, but in a private network, it actually limits the number of it puts some artificial limits in terms of performance. So we are also exploring. Right now, we're still way below the theoretical limit Ethereum would have, but we are already thinking about once we reach a certain scale, what could be the next steps to overcome even these kind of challenges. Over.
We have Dr. Dania Bilal who asks, says, enlightening presentation, thank you, and provides a comment. There have been many published studies about refugee experiences, for example, in Al-Zaatari camp. And so the question, what technologies do the people have access to?
Well, I mean, so far we're working in a no-tech environment, as in the refugee doesn't have to carry anything whatsoever with them. They walk into the supermarket, they get their goods, they scan their eyes, they walk out. So for the moment, zero. Same thing in Bangladesh, only with fingerprints. But again, our hope is that once they do have smartphones with connectivity, we would like them to have a dedicated beneficiary application where they can see their information, they can see their past transaction history, upcoming entitlements, they can authorize transactions from it. So it would be essentially an Android application that they would have on a smartphone, but neither of these are a current reality due to limitations. Over.
Our next question comes from John Quinn. Thanks for such an inspiring presentation. Given the need to manage donor requests and conditions as well as distribution of aids, what kind of information architecture do you use to support this complex network of information, organizations, and activities?
So building blocks is both, well, at its core, it's a blockchain network. So it's a connection of nodes running this Ethereum, let's say, blockchain. On top of this network, we launch so-called smart contracts, which is a really bad name because they're neither smart or a contract, but they're programs that run on this core operating system, which is the blockchain. So we have the nodes. Each participating organization has a validator node, and each participating organization launches its own smart contract on top of this network. So WFP has one, UN Women has one, whatever. Within this smart contract, people do what they want, and then there is a common registry that if you wish to get that common view, you can essentially through that get a visibility that we're talking about Houman across these different smart contracts. So essentially, that's more or less the architecture of how it works. So it's a blockchain network with a smart contract per organization assisting people through them. I hope that's, without going into too much technical detail, I hope that's enough.
Dr. Logan Rath asked, thank you for your talk this morning. What would it take for a bad actor to disrupt the system?
Well, that's also something related to the architecture, in fact. So a lot of this comes down to the so-called management of those passwords I was talking about. Bad actors could disrupt in two ways. One is by, first of all, if they have unauthorized access to the system, they could spam it. So they could send a lot of fake or spurious transactions to slow down the network performance. Our system is private, and each access to be able to send transactions need to be authorized. So that would be very difficult to do, let's say, for such a bad act. The other part of it is that each organization manages the passwords, quote unquote, in a custodianship model for the people they assist. However, when these people are shared, even though we have common visibility, we cannot do anything on behalf of UN Women, and they cannot do anything on behalf of us. They can authorize each other's things. So in this way, it's also compartmentalized that even if somebody with, I don't know, incredible effort gains even access to that, they could only potentially affect one category from one organization, but not the whole network for everybody. So that's another way that we mitigate this. Over.
Our next question comes from Timothy Dickey. Quick follow-up on the security question. If the ideal personal account access is via personal smartphone, what happens if the phone itself is lost, stolen, or confiscated? Are you using biometric identification on the phone itself?
Well, the method of authentication is not important for us. It can be biometric, it can be password, it can be a one-time password, it can be a security device. So that really depends case by case. My imagination is that if we're talking about the population we are serving, at least for now, perhaps non-biometric phones might be more affordable, but I really don't know. But the question of what if it gets stolen is really important. So at least I think the application storing the password will be encrypted, and it will be password protected anyway. So unless that password is shared, even if the phone is stolen, things should be good. One of the challenges, though, is that that password, it's pretty secure. So if you lose it, technically there is no way of reconstructing it. right? And this happens. People lose their password to their Bitcoin accounts, and millions, sometimes billions of dollars get locked up, and there's no way to get back. One of the ways to mitigate this to some extent is that these passwords can be constructed from so-called seeds. So for example, there can be 20 words like black, chair, cat, avocado, whatever. And these either can be stored, written somewhere securely, or for example, you could give half of it to your brother, the other half to your sister, whatever, among distributed friends. So if that password is eventually stolen with the phone, there's a chance to recreate that access by having these seeds come together, essentially. There are some other approaches as well, but perhaps this will be one of the simpler ones. But that is, in fact, one of the key challenges of transferring this ownership to the people we serve, because the digital literacy needs to be part of that transfer process, because the implications would, of course, be very high. Over.
We have a last question by Dr. Clara Chu. You spoke about other entities, organizations, governments, etc., joining the efforts and leveraging the technology. What are some of these entities and what will they bring to the efforts? For example, more and diverse funding, new areas for humanitarian aid, faster and efficient response to emergency response regions such as Beirut, where I understand the WFP has been assisting post the August explosion, etc. In short, what is your wish list in developing the BB?
The wish list is overcoming past challenges. As I mentioned, there have been a lot of previous efforts for collaboration, and for one reason or another, politics included, they haven't succeeded. My true hope is that by at least being the first time that we have a solution that offers to remove that political barrier, we will see true collaboration. That is the day for me that we would have really reached our objective. Now, it's interesting Beirut is mentioned. So as colleagues online might know, on August 4th, there was a devastating blast in the Beirut port, and many were affected by that. Various humanitarian organizations, WFP included, rushed in to help, but there is now no common visibility exactly on who's assisting whom with what, how that's being assisted. There is a common agreement that if one organization provided assistance in a certain category, no other organization will provide in the same category because funding is limited. So instead of by mistake giving 10 times to Houman, and nothing to Kendra, the idea is try to make it more equitable, but there is no visibility. On top of that, there's issues with registration. So registration data has been collected, but if you want to create common identifiers independently, the spelling of the name, a change, Houman or Hooman would give two different identifiers. Over the past few weeks, we've worked rapidly to come up with some solutions. So, for example, we're going to use so-called phonetic libraries, which instead of looking at the exact spelling of the name, they look at how it sounds, what is the pronunciation, and generate a code to try to capture these variations in spelling and a bunch of other things. Create common identifiers and use building blocks to provide this coordination or at least visibility on who's doing what. And we've on top added an optional feature that says that, if you have 80,000 people and you have 20 organizations, it's impossible to coordinate on an account by account level. I'll assist Baharat, you don't assist Kendra, I will assist Houman. It's just not possible. And it's a dynamic list. It keeps changing from moment to moment. So long story short, you have a list of the people who are eligible according to your criteria of hunger or poverty or whatever. You upload them to building blocks. There's a flag that says that if anyone else assisted in the same month already in the same category of cash, food, whatever, skip the account. You get that list back and you say, okay, out of the money you have, 40 accounts were not loaded because other people assisted. You redirect those 40 to the next group of vulnerable people on your list, because typically there's various levels of vulnerability, extremely, medium, low, whatever. Of course, you start with the extreme and you go down. This system might, in fact, go live as early as tomorrow. We've been working pretty much around the clock, so maybe I will be able to share some results later this month, hopefully. Over.
I think that's the end of the questions for now, and we are so grateful for your attendance and your wonderful presentation on this very important topic. I know I was extremely impressed by the work that you're doing, and best wishes for continued great success. We thank you so much for your time today. So if we had applause, there would be a very loud applause, I'm sure. So thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been an honor to attend. Thank you for thinking of me, and I hope to be able to continue our collaboration moving forward. Over.
Thank you.